the dynamics of the oil market, it's also changed the psychology of the oil market, and we saw that at work. So that's short term. Short term in terms of natural gas, last year was 6 different records set in terms of LNG, including by far the largest number of go-aheads on investment. But longer term, as anybody who's been at Davos for the last 5 minutes will know, is the issue of the energy transition. And so we will go from the short term to the long term in terms of our discussion. I thought we might just begin by talking about the short term. What are the geopolitical and economic factors that will affect the market this year, next year, and maybe start with His Royal Highness and ask that question. And what's the role of an OPEC Plus in this?
Well, thank you very much, and glad to be here with you. It's my first to be in Davos, so bear with me. I'm in my so-called orientation here. Without much ado, I know that we have lots to talk about and a few minutes to share amongst us, and therefore I'll just confine in my response to this question by saying, since when we have seen a market when an entire country production comes almost to a complete halt and yet prices come down? It only happens when we have an OPEC Plus attending to the market. Has it not been for OPEC Plus, none of that would have happened. Obviously, has it not been for Saudi Arabia and Saudi Aramco and the work of the government of Saudi Arabia, again, I just want to put that as a question for all of you and for the audience who are going to be watching this, how on earth we could have mitigated the impact of what happened to Abqaiq and Khurais. In such timely manner, and what could have happened to the world supply of energy and oil in particular, and how much would have had an impact on the world economy. So what you see today is a very tentative OPEC and OPEC Plus. We're vigilant of what is happening. The market sees that there is an attendance to this market, a responsive attendance. Otherwise, you would not see that production halt of Libya, which started 2 days ago, and yet you had two days of consecutive lower oil prices. But what we are after here in our endeavor is not to be price responsive, as opposed to be supply responsive, and looking at the whole sustainability of short-term and also long-term markets, that without which I think we will be defeating ourselves in focusing on just the short term or just the long term.
Right. Well, in terms of the short or medium term, what are you looking for in the next 2 years that would affect the market one way or the or do you just see it kind of continuing on at current course?
Well, Danny, you and I, we were participating in the Russian Energy Week. And within that panel, I did raise two issues which truly appeared somewhat foreign at that time. Although we were just off upcake situation. But I did, I remind you, and you could, by the way, look it up. It's in the public domain. I said, you know, don't be surprised that when talking about trade issue, for example, that I said at the end of the day, I could see the US and China resolving this issue because neither the US nor China had lost the ability to have sensible people to attend to these issues. I also did flag the issue of supply and concern of supply because at that discussion, we spent a lot of time talking about demand and demand and demand emanating from this so-called dark black swan scenario of big trade concerns, big concerns about the growth of the world economy, this and that. It was like a, you know, kind of a bit pessimistic time. I did raise that issue. I said, well, you could get it from both in trade issues being resolved, but supply issues have been, will be a focal point. I think it is a focal point, no doubt. Coming from a country like Libya, concern about the Middle East, but more important also, big question on shale oil and sustainability of the numbers that it has been projected for this year. I know, Dan, you have better than me in doing that, but what I see now is there is a lot of questions about how much shale oil will be produced, incremental increase. If that number that we've heard, which is the million and 1,000,001 and 1,000,002, is there good for them? If not, well, again, we will have to be attentive.
Yeah, I think I would try something more like 400,000 for this year.
Well, in October, where people were talking about 1.2.
I'd say 400,000. So,
but
you won't disagree.
but the IEA still maintain, well, at least with their trajectory yesterday, that they are talking about still 1 million barrels of surplus. I don't know from where that million surplus would happen if we still have an OPEC Plus agreement, and we still have the potential to continue with that agreement, and we still are talking about probably 400 or 600 of incremental shale oil. I don't know from where these numbers that they keep floating.
Right. Well, Patrick, you have a global view. How does you look out the next year or two of the market?
I think one of the uncertainties clearly is the demand. I will not speak about the supply. His Highness is the expert. And my job is just, I'm piloting the break-even of my company under $50 per barrel, so all that is good for me. Now the demand, I think the demand last year clearly was a slowdown, plus 1 million barrel of oil per day. It's never definitive, mainly because of Chinese slowdown, because of these trade wars, and I think this is one of the aspects of the market which is also important, because the market is not only a question of supply. I know in these rooms everybody's speaking about supply and the future of fossil fuels is a question of supply. Fundamentally, we should also speak about the demand, because the future of climate change is mainly driven, will be driven even on the long term by the demand for fossil fuels. People don't consume oil because because we produce oil. We produce oil because they need oil to make planes, steel, cement, etc. No more comment. I never comment price of oil price, in particular in front of. But let's be clear.
I think that's
But to be clear,
prudent.
I'm a
That's
strong
wise.
supporter of the OPEC Plus policy.
Right, okay.
I'm very grateful for the industry understanding. But I don't comment about prices because I keep telling people that my personal mentor and exemplary person is Alan Greenspan. Alan Greenspan doesn't talk about what he will do with interest rates. I don't talk about what will happen to oil prices.
Right. And of course, he specialized in mumbling, so if you work on mumbling, you can be even more obscure.
I have developed that talent.
Yes. So let me,
If it is required.
right, at the right moment. Let's turn to gas. Wan Zulkifli, tell us LNG market. As I just said, all these records were set in last year in terms of the growth of the market. There's just some questions about the market.
Thank you, Dan. First of all, thank you. Happy to be on this panel. Since no one wants to forecast any prices, so I will also not talk about prices, but just a few things on the LNG market. Let me talk about the market, the demand side first. I think China has been a very big contributor to the growth in demand for the last few years. But last year I think there's been a slowing down of this growth in demand, and partly because of the conversion of coal to gas. I think there's some pullback from the Chinese authorities, where I think now economics will play a bigger role compared to years before. Japan, we still 9 reactors that are running, as far as I know today, compared to more than 50 that's installed. Korea is very good in terms of demand. I think the regulators there have put some environmental costs in deciding on how they want to dispatch power. And Taiwan is also taking big steps in terms of coal to gas conversion. So that's at least on the Far East, that's the market. But on the supply side, strange things happen actually. Last year alone, we have got 70 million tons of projects being sanctioned, 70 million tons. And also last year, I think when first cargoes coming out of projects, probably equivalent additional capacity of 40 million tons. So there's a big overhang of capacity on the supply side. So, but not all plants are working at 100%. I think not many of us talk about limitations in the upstream supply. I think many of us focus on the plant LNG liquefaction capacity, but not all plants are running, because I know of plants having constraints on the upstream. So I think this market will be oversupplied probably in 2024 to 2027 kind of period, where these new projects come on. So we'll see not a very strong prices in the short term, but still the demand is run about 3.5% on the average in the coming years. So weak prices in the short to medium term, but going forward, our forecast is there's a step up in prices.
And a lot of gas.
And a lot of gas. Anyway, the other thing that's funny, I think, when you look at the regas terminal capacity, is 900 million tons globally. So everybody is wanting to have options of importing for reliability.
Right.
But the current demand is probably 350, 370.
Maria Fernando, for you, gas is a particular issue in Colombia, and just tell us how you're addressing it.
Well, we're addressing gas as a key player in the energy transition. I do believe that part of the equations that we need to bring together as companies and policymakers is the energy transition and those trends, how will influence oil and gas. And Colombia, in the last projection, will be running out of gas by starting on 2024, so we'll have to build some LNG facilities to import gas. However, we're having a huge discussions because we have opportunities in unconventional, but we have all the political discussions around the topic.
What, you are having, we understand, very intense discussions around it. Tell us about the discussions about shale in Colombia, role of government, role of companies, role of activists.
Okay, so first, we have a very prospective basin for shale. And from that stand, the government has said, or we have said, that we will address it in a very responsible way because there are a lot of movements against shale in Colombia. And it's not like the popular thing to say, but we believe it's the responsible thing to do. And that makes a huge difference. And I believe that that's part of the discussion regarding the future of this industry and how we will address it as companies and as governments towards the activism that we're seeing on the environmental issues, on climate change, and the challenges that the industry will face looking forward will be much more to do regarding those social issues and environmental issues rather than prospectivity or operational challenges that used to be the challenges of the past or break-even prices.
So in terms of the opposition, is it against shale? Is it against companies? Is it against government?
So what we have found in the opposition is that the opposition is against fossil fuels. And what we are looking forward to work within the companies and the industry and in the national debate is to have the conversation. We have to start to construct the narrative regarding is not ending the fossil fuels because, for example, with the technology that we currently know, we need gas in our power mix. It is about ending the emissions, not ending the fossil fuels. And that's something that we do need to stress out. And I do believe that companies, oil and gas companies, has, if you see the track record of innovation on how technology challenges the industry has addressed, ending emissions is really the most important challenge that the industry can address currently, and that will make us that the industry can fit in a properly way in this energy transition and what youth is expecting from the industry.
So Patrick, I see you violently shaking your head.
No, I think it's fundamental. It's a very excellent remark. I think the debate today, there is no doubt the world will need more energy. We have a growing population. There is a lot of people, many emerging countries want to get people out of poverty. Energy is at the core of any wealth and social economic development in any country. But the strong dilemma we have and the challenge, the opportunity is more energy and less emissions. less carbon, I would say. And the debate today, which tries to antagonize on the supply of oil and gas and fossil fuels with the idea that we could curtail the supply, is a wrong debate. It's not leaders of this world here. We are there to give prosperity to the people around the planet. And so which will go with energy? So the question for us is to be proactive and progressive, and this is why I was approving. You perfectly have the right way to put the debate. Is less emissions. And so we must find a way to shift it from, again, and less emissions, it goes where, how do we use the energy? Using the energy, so it's a matter of energy efficiency, which is the first and foremost, most important part of any climate change program in any country, because if we want to be in a 2-degree world, we are supposed in 2040 to use the consumption should be the same than today, which is a huge challenge. And secondly, is to tackle of can we, in the plane industry, in the shipping industry, the cement industry, of can we find new ways to bring the energy we need. But the idea that we will, but curtailing the supply, which eliminate oil and gas, then we will solve the issue, is a wrong approach. So it tells that, and when you take any studies, in 2050, we'll still have some oil and gas in the energy mix. Of course, we want to be neutral, which means that we also need to develop some, carbon neutrality technologies. We can come back on it. But I think this is the right way to put the debate. Less emissions, but we have, our first mission is to bring the energy to the people of the planet.
Is carbon capture, use and storage underestimated?
It's globally, for me, everything is good. The first, I would say, carbon wells, or way to compensate is nature-based solution. It's much more efficient than CCUS. But CCUS, yes, is underestimated because it will be required. Listen to Fatih, he's not there today generally, but it's in any scenario, I think there is a dream that we can get rid of anything. We will work, but we will continue to have this, the energy mix today. Everybody thinks coal is the energy of the past. It's 27% of the energy mix of the world is coal. And so this transition, we speak about, I read the figure, $700 trillion. It will take time. So we need to take actions, obviously, but we need also to be pragmatic. And yes, this type of technologies, and it's part of our strategy, we invest today in technologies which will allow us to make this neutrality. The carbon neutrality technology, CCUS, is one of them.
Well, Maria Fernanda, you have a particular technology that's very powerful for carbon capture. Maybe you might reveal
Yes,
that.
Definitely. I think that the most effective technology that we have around in the planet are trees. So we have the Amazon, and actually the President Duque is currently in Davos and just launched Be Part of the initiative of championing 1 billion trees. And I think that industry has to stress that and work very hard on that. But I will add to that we need to do both things simultaneously. So I will stress industry to work more hard in reforestation, because there isn't anything more effective than a tree. But at the same time, I do stress the companies to invest much more in technology and innovation to capture emission. I have seen how the industry, when it's determined to address a technological challenge, has always been able to achieve it. So if you put leadership determination, money. And we are convinced that that is the future. I am sure that the industry will have CCUS or any other source of technologies to reduce or eliminating emissions instead, because otherwise the challenge for the industry is to stay alive.
Right.
So
Right. So Prince Abdulaziz, tell us where you're thinking, Saudi Arabia is thinking on energy transition. And I know that you've put a strong emphasis on energy efficiency for some time.
Well, my job is to promote Saudi Arabia, but in this one, I'm proud to promote Saudi Arabia because we've got it all. I'm with great deal of confidence. I could tell you that whatever Patrick was talking about, whatever Her Excellency was talking about, we're doing it all. Whatever you just talked about, we're doing all. I'll tell you what we are running. We're running with a big ball now, which is called circular carbon economy, which takes into account everything that Your Excellency have said and everything that Patrick had said. We're pioneers on carbon sequestration. In fact, we have a big project that Aramco is pursuing now. We're doing a lot of efficiency, both upstream, downstream, midstream, even on the demand side, at all levels. We have one of the lowest carbon intensity in production. Extraction.
True.
we have all of that. Come and see Saudi Arabia, and we challenge everybody to come up with a record that like ours. In efficiency, we reduce our consumption and energy intensity in our economy with a great deal of percentages. We're converting cars and transportation and every gadget in Saudi Arabia to the most efficient gadgets that you could ever buy in any market in the world. We're manufacturing even better ones. With the issue of climate change, we are involved in a transformative effort whereby we're going to be using all. We will save liquids because we owe it to the world that we save our liquids to be exported. We are converting our power sector and our power sector energy mix, where by 2030 I am particularly sure and particularly keen to deliver on that, because we have a particular boss whose name is Prince Mohammed, who is all over me to ensure that we become one of the top producers of solar energy and renewable energy in Saudi Arabia. So actually, I can make a pledge and a commitment that by 2030, those who, well, I wouldn't be there probably, most likely, but I'm sure that by 2030, you will see our entire power sector moving with rarity in some parts where it is remote. You'll see it gas. And you will see it renewable. We're also plugging ourselves with nuclear. A lot of people ask why we are engaged in nuclear. I say simply, we want to have all our options open. In the G20, and it's not distant far, so people cannot say, well, they're just putting that story for the razzmatazz and the PR. No, we are engaged with the G20 in our Saudi agenda, promoted by Saudi Arabia, promoting circular carbon economy, promoting an initiative of a trillion tree, as Her Excellency was talking. But honestly, we have to be realistic. You know, I looked at the paper that the WIF did with the IEA on how can we meet the 2% and what have you. They're talking about 2 years from now, oil consumption should come down. Can anybody in this room with a sensible mind can come to that reality? And gas
One index that I really like and I always look at is this ownership of air conditioning units, especially in ASEAN region. Since the year 2000, the ownership has increased 3 times till today. And there are still many, many more people in ASEAN that's without air conditioning. So you see, I totally agree that we need to develop all forms of energy, yeah, to meet this growing demand. But the one thing is, after we've announced our statement of purpose, to get the whole organization aligned is also another challenge. Even in the leadership team, we had to revisit our portfolio. And today, I know Fatih mentioned, you know, in general, only 1% of the capex has been allocated to what we call new energy. In Petronas today, we have got 5% of our capex for this year has been allocated to new energy. But this requires also a paradigm shift in terms of our investment philosophy, because in general, the returns are a lot lower than what we are used to but you know, these are long term. We brought in new talents because these are new skills for us. But the second point that I like to mention is also this technology investment against carbon emission. This is also our commitment in terms of to continue to invest. You know, 10 to 15% of the emission is due to oil and gas operations. I think that's one of the IEA study. So this, you know, be it CCUS, be it on our design philosophies, on flaring, and many, many other things that we are investing. And I also do not want to miss out on gas advocacy. Gas advocacy, I think gas will play a very important role in this transition going forward. My last point is on policy. You know, I mean, governments at different parts of the world, I think the policies is also a function of the state of economy, because there are different stages of economy. So in terms of determining what would be the most optimum energy mix, it varies from country to country. And you know, it's the more east you go, I think the sentiments of this carbon emission, I think it gets a little bit more diluted, because I think affordability is a major consideration of governments. I think it is also our roles as oil and gas companies also to shape the agenda for governments. So I think this is what we are also doing, especially in Malaysia, on essentially how to have a national energy policy that would withstand the test of time, and also to address this carbon transition.
Thank you for that comprehensive answer. It leads to one question for Maria Fernanda before I have time, I think, for questions from the audience. The role of policymakers.
Very hard. and after 2 days at WEF, many of the meetings end in saying governments should do. And one of the concerns is the discussion regarding it's a demand issue. So energy will be more needed because it's demand driven, not because the industry is an evil. That the only way that policymakers will continue to get along with the industry is that if we really are on the right side of the challenge that we have. And the right side is we need to acknowledge that climate change is a reality and that we cannot save any effort to work towards that. And that means, from my perspective, first, having the highest operational standards. It has to be inadmissible that any of the companies operating in any country have fugitive emissions. Or that have operational standards that they produce emissions that they can avoid. So that's first. And second, as I will mention, I will say that my dream will be that the industry will have soon technological breakthrough to be able to really capture the emissions, and that we'll have a different discussion. We have to be realistic regarding oil and gas will be needed in all the projections that we're seeing right now, but that can change at any moment if there is a technology breakthrough. So it better be the technology breakthrough in capturing the emissions.
Right. Patrick, I've heard you say that Total spends 10% not 1% on.
No, we spend on low carbon electricity 10%, 10%, more than 10%. In fact, we spend more than $2 billion per year out of $16 billion. So we are already quite engaged, and it will grow, let's be clear. It will grow. A comment I would like to say, one thing we can do as well, which is not rocket science, because people think a lot about innovation technology. You know, there are ways also to act on our products, on oil and on gas. We can mix oil with biofuels. We can decarbonize oil. And biofuel is something on which we need to continue to forget. Because for planes, for example, honestly, for planes, long-range plane, I don't see any strong, clear solution rather than a liquid fuel. So we need to look to liquid fuels and the way to decarbonize. And natural gas, I think there is also a way to decarbonize partly. If I'm engaging more and more in hydrogen, but we can produce hydrogen from renewables, and we can inject hydrogen in natural gas, and we will be decarbonizing. We can easily inject up to 10% in natural gas networks. Biogas is another option. So I think there are also ways. The future of fossil fuels is also maybe not the same fossil fuels tomorrow than today. And these are also technologies which are in our hand. So it's a matter, of course, to adapt, and then again, to work, and again, for example, to engage, because I think we need to engage, for example, with the plane industry to understand, because I'm not an expert in engine of plane, but I can bring solutions, and we need to engage together, the energy world with each sector of the demand, and we will find solutions, and they are there. I know it's fashionable today to announce we'll be carbon neutral in 2050, all of us. We will not be there in 2050. And what I want is to act today, to do my mission 25, 2030. It's for me more important. And we have pragmatic solutions to engage, even if everything is not perfect.
Daniel, one quick thing regarding policymakers and how difficult it is. Just see the demonstration we had on climate change, but we also had demonstration in Paris, Europe, regarding raising fuel prices. So that's part of the equation. It's too hard. So imagine if that happening in France, what is happening in developing world. So that's inconsistent, and that's part of the things that we need to address.
Right. So I guess you wanted to add something?
Well, that tells you how relaxing my job is. We're cool and calm in Saudi Arabia. We're attending to our own agenda. You know, I had to advise people from avoiding being manipulated and intimidated. The way we do things in Saudi Arabia is we avoid these intimidations here and there. And we don't hear these nuances that not necessarily are productive. We try to focus on what we do and what is right and what is consistent with our record. We feel that strongly that we have a record that we want to preserve and maintain. It's our pillar to gain more confidence of our customers, our clients, and the world by saying, as we have promised you 60 years ago, we're still maintaining our promises, and we will carry on performing our promises. Being responsible producer with the notion that you want to continue being a reliable also producer. You've got to come out of the closet and say, this is doable and this is not doable. This is possible and this is not possible. And without which you are not behaving and conducting yourself as a responsible producer. This is not about promoting oil or promoting gas or promoting renewable. It's about promoting prosperity and sustainability for a world that, and I don't want to convert the discussion as North and South dialogue and what have you, but there is a lot of growing should happen, growing in terms of well-being. economic growth in Africa, in Asia. These countries, these societies need to move from energy poverty, need to move to a pattern of sustainable development, needs to move to a level of industrialization, and they don't have to carry the burden of the previous industrialization phase or the burden of it. It's not fair. It's not equitable. And you cannot, and I've always hated that concept of top-bottom approaches. There is this element of condescending on an impositioning of agendas that are pertinent and maybe of worthiness to those who are propagating it, but it is only attending to their own concern. It does not address those who are at a certain different level of development or a certain level of aspiration, and they are not there yet. With that in mind, I would like to just one suggestion. Being as a proactive country as we are now, I would suggest that if we can, WIF enable us next year, that we can put together a full-fledged workshop demonstrating, showing you what Saudi Arabia is doing in that energy sphere across the board. And we will be more than happy to host it, and we will be more than happy to open it for anybody to come.
Thank you. We promised at the beginning that we would discuss the short, the medium, and long term of oil and gas. I was very much looking forward to having questions, but we had such a good panel and we covered so much that I see that we're out of time. So I apologize to everybody in the audience for not having the chance to ask questions. But please join me in thanking our four panelists for a great